this is the story I was told. And when the boats came, about 300 of them passed away on the trip. There was 1,500 and then 298 or somewhere around there. And when they got here, it was a prison camp. It was the men and women and the children of the influential people, the people who had the Oyate's ear, I guess, so to say, and so they put them there in a prison camp, and they degraded them in front of their children and families to maybe stop that awareness of what they were. And the things that they did to them were they would have to sell themselves. The women would have to sell themselves to feed their children, sometimes sell their own children to feed everybody. And they sexually assaulted the men in front of their families to show them that they weren't nothing and things like that. And I never could understand why we had to do all that. And my godfather was telling me a story that I heard a story and I ran it by him. And the story I heard was that before all this, before the white man came, and while we still had our way of life and it was real strong, that Tukashila, when all the spiritual people were gathered, told them that, hey, there's change coming. It's gonna, the balance. And that not to worry, that they'll put all the people where the healing will come from in one spot, and that's where the healing will come from. And then they said that place is here, and I was like, wow. I thought about that, and I kept that story to myself for a long time, and I ran it by my godfather, who lived those ways and things like that. And he looks at me and said, yeah, that's been told by everybody for a long, long time. I said, why doesn't anybody in Fort know it then? Why ain't they sharing it? It's a prophecy. It's gonna come true. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess that makes sense, But those things that we've been through as a people, I used to look at it as see ourselves in a negative light, but the more I'm aware of our history and who we are, the more I see that it's just showing us how strong we are and the strength we have, and the things we already overcome. And looking at that, the things we already overcome, there's nothing that we can't do. And that's why I come on these things. They say the horse reflects what you carry, and if you come with anger, it'll show you anger, and when you come with sadness, it'll come and help you. Maybe not on this ride, but we have some horses at our pasture, and my mom, she works in the social services field and works in a shelter and children's advocacy center at the time. And this one lady came and said she was in a bad situation, talking to my mom, and said she had this dream of these horses. And she said, well, we got some horses, you can come check them out. She goes out there. First horse she sees is the one in her dream, and she just starts bawling because it had to do with some family members that passed away and things like that. And as she was sitting there crying, all of them horses got in a line, all stood in front of her and went. And then the last horse came, the one she dreamt about, and put his head right on her shoulders. And I don't know, I think that's all that needs to be said about the horse. They know more than we do. And when we find that connection, wow, man, the power behind that. They say the shunka waka, and the dog's a shunka. Well, like, from what I'm understanding and learning, and I could be wrong, but this is what I'm starting to understand, is the dog, shunka means more than that. The dog, and what a dog is, it's the friend. No matter what you do, it's always there when you need it, And then the horse does all that, but sacred, bigger. And It is. That's what it is. They're big dogs, I guess.
You know, the War of 1862, they call it the Dakota Uprising. That happened back in Minnesota. It's more complicated than people think. They think it started over some eggs, and that's the farthest thing from the truth. It was through starvation. They were starving the people. They were on that strip. They called it the Minnesota Strip. And all around them was all these farmers, and they had been clearing all their land off, and the people still had this strip, and they're going there taking our resources. And from what I've heard was the women couldn't even go out and gather for fear of being assaulted by them. And who would you go to for justice? You know, who do you believe? You know, like it's even like that today. But it started from way back then, all the way to the war.
What had happened was after the Minnesota Uprising, and Abraham Lincoln hung 38 of our grandfathers, plus two more a year later. The women and the children and the old men were put on the boats, and they kept the men in prison down there, I believe in Davenport, Iowa. But they brought them up the river here to Fort Thompson, and 1,300 got on the boats down there and only 1,000 arrived. So 300 perished along the way. So if you look at our staff, a woman who has a hard time, there's 300 eagle plumes that are around her. They represent the 300 that perished along the way.
Then after the war, the people, the 38 being hung, people put in Fort Snelling, and it was hell there for them. And there's stories there of what was happening to the women because they separated the men and the women and what was happening. Nobody really believed it until those letters came out. There's Dakota letters. There's a lot of stories in there. My mother-in-law, she read one and she started crying because it told what happened, what that girl was going through, and they couldn't do nothing about it from the soldiers. From there, after the hangings, the women being sent down, women, children, and the elderly sent downriver, St. Louis, up the river, and to what would be known as Crow Creek. If you ever go to Santee, Nebraska, there's a mural in the tribal building. They call it the cap office. The cap office. There's a mural in there of a steamboat called the Florence, and on that steamboat, it's packed with faces, upper decks, lower decks. It's completely. They said it was standing room only on there. They were fed pork and hard bread and the water from the Missouri. That's what they had to eat. And people started dying, started getting sick. Some of them jumped off because they didn't know what was coming for them, and they'd already been through hell back in Fort Snelling and watching the people, watching our warriors be hung. And then they were chained up. They were chained up like, you know, and these were women, you know, like, are they dangerous? Why are they chained up? But they chained them up when they sent them up the river, and they disembarked at Crow Creek. That's where they took them, and then there was nothing there for them. Nothing, and you know, and I to me, I feel like they thought that people were like animals, like people can take a dog and take it out in the country and let it go and think that dog is going to survive. You know what? By 98% of the time, that dog dies because they don't know how to survive. And you know, the women were sent to a land that was different from the woodlands of Minnesota, without anything, with children, and left to fend for themselves. And the rations they had, it wasn't enough. And there was the there's all kinds of stories about cottonwood soup and what they were forced to eat. There's stories about the. These are the easy stories. The easy stories are of them going through horse manure, picking out grains of corn, or any kind of grains to make some kind of soup for their children. That's the easy stories. There was a man there. He was a commander. He encouraged his men. We found his what they call memoirs or whatever. His journals. That's what they call them, journals. We found his journals. And in his journals, he encouraged his men to dehumanize the women. And what that meant, and we know what that meant, and that's what happened to them. He said things in his journals that about the women's bodies, that do whatever you want to them, dehumanize them, and they did. And nobody to protect them. The men were imprisoned in Davenport, Iowa. So they had to live through that, still trying to feed their children. Later on, they had to turn to that to feed their children, do anything and everything to try to feed their children. First year, over 300 died, over 300 children from starvation, malnutrition, sickness. And and somebody said, well, they drank milk. Well, you know what? They didn't have bottles for babies. Those women nursed those babies. So what happens when that woman don't get enough nutrition? She's not going to produce milk. And that's what happened. The babies started dying, and all over those hills are graves of those little ones. So all these things happening to them, and yet still trying to hang on. And the dehumanization part, it didn't happen like they wanted to. It made them more human because they did everything and anything to keep their babies alive, trying to. I've asked all the women on this ride for the last 5 years if they would do the same thing. They all said yes. Because you do whatever you could for your children, and if you have children, I'm a man. I would die for my children. My grandkids. If something was to happen, I would die for them, and that's what those women did. And that's just a Dakota thing, or maybe it's a human being trait. I don't know, but you would die for your children. And this whole ride started on that 38 ride when we were riding, and I was talking to my son, and I told him about this. He didn't know nothing about it. He's a Yankton Sioux. He didn't know nothing about it, and very few people knew about this part of history. And I told him about it, and then I learned more. I learned more and more, and I talked to people up here in Fort Thompson, and we did some research. There's no pictures anywhere from 1863 to 1866. It's like that part of history is gone. They erased it. We can't find any pictures of what happened. Just later after that. But I told him about it. And I said, we should do a ride for them. To honor them. To honor them and to remember those children. And it was when you say something, you make a commitment to do something like that, you should keep going on it. So we did. And it was a struggle, but we did that first year. We honored those grandmothers. We call them our grandmothers because there was no age limit on those women up there. They wasn't 30 years old. It might have been real young girls to grandmas. But they all went through hell up there, and they did whatever they could to try to feed those children. So I told them we need to honor them for being moms, being mothers. So it was hard, because when we talk about these things, my friend Claude, he always told me we have something inside us, and it's called historical trauma. And right now I'm getting a little bit like that, getting a little sad thinking about it again. But I think about them, my mom, my grandma, what they did for us. And it's just what they did back then. They did everything and anything. Those children, we remembered them. That first year we did what they couldn't do up then. When they died, when they passed away. We had ceremony for them. And we honored those moms for doing, like I said, doing what they did.
The main focus, Dakota 38, message is reconciliation and healing. Everything that evolves around it is it's all intertwined with each other and stuff like that. So these rides are all intertwined. The lifestyle, the horse culture, the horses, they're all intertwined with it, and they're all contributing, and they're all helping to heal. And what I'd like to see is this carried on further, and people recognize it as healing. I mean, we ain't talking medicine. We ain't talking modern medicine. IHS, the kind of healing we're talking about, you can't do it in IHS. It's inside, and it's I guess they call it generational trauma. All that bad negativity that we carry inside us, that's been collected from back there up until now. I mean, it's so we're so used to it that we don't even know that we're doing it. I mean, a lot of the people, we have to explain this healing and explain it to them so they can make that connection. I mean, they all know, there's something there that's not clicking. What is this? I mean, they're smart people, but it's been conditioning to the point where they don't understand, they don't see it, they don't realize what they're doing sometimes, and like that and stuff. So that's what we're trying to break here. And the healing, when they recognize it, when they see it, when they understand it, then they can start helping themselves. But if they don't, there's a lot of them that go through it and stuff and not really, because of all the alcohol, all the drugs, all the, don't make that connection. And it's really hard because we have to sit back and watch them this destructive behavior that they're conditioned to use, and it's a very, very painful situation for everyone. So
after that, they exiled Dakota. I mean, a lot of the Dakota went north, went west. You know, the ones that they had in prison there at Fort Snelling were the ones who were sent to Crow Creek. And that Crow Creek, that name, nobody talked about it. I mean, nobody talked about Crow Creek. You didn't hear about it. You never heard stories about it. I remember hearing some stories one time, and I didn't know exactly what they were talking about. This is when I was young. But nobody talked about it because it was such a hard part of our history. And we have history books. They talk about Crow Creek a little bit. All they say is they had a hard time, and that's it. Nothing else. It's like they didn't want the world to know what those soldiers did. You know that those were war crimes, but they don't like to hear that. And that was a POW camp, but they don't want to say that. You know, and these were women and children under the care of the United States government. Abraham Lincoln. A lot of people think Abraham Lincoln was a good man. He knew what was going on. He knew he's the one who signed the order on the 38. And they always say he was compassionate, but it wasn't that. It was because of other countries watching what was happening here in this country. Just like today, when something happens, other countries are watching us. This country right now, for whatever we do, whatever happens. And that's the same way back then. And he was scared they were going to join the Confederacy, because that went on the same time as the Civil War.
Largest mass execution in history, United States. They hung 38 Dakota boys in Mankato, Minnesota, December 26, 1862. We needed to remember them, to honor them, to bring awareness to them, and for their sacrifice that they made. I mean, a lot of the Dakota boys over there that were captured and that were taken in as prisoners and stuff thought that they had a truce because they helped, and it wasn't that way. So for their help to the non-native, they suffered for it severely.
For the Dakota people, and anything that we do with horses, or we do with rides or runs or walks, is not only a memorial, but is to help heal what they call historical hurt, historical trauma. Same thing as veterans of war have is PTSD, that post-traumatic stress disorder. And so those effects from then still affect us today. And so we take a prayer, we start a prayer, and then we take that, we carry that. Horses help carry that, the people, the staffs, and then when it's done, we try to let that go. So we take that, any kind of hurt and trauma, and we take it and we let it go. And we're always thinking about the little guys, if you can see behind, the little guys. So they don't have to struggle and they don't have to battle anymore. And when you go through history in different parts of those, you have religious persecution, you have the educational persecution, and all those different eras from that 1862 era for Dakota people. So you have a boarding school era, religious persecution. That's basically how these communities got started, whether it's Crow Creek or Santee or Flandreau, and it was an imposed religion, and so it all led into what they call federal law, which was Indian Court of Offenses. If we did what we're doing today back then, all the men here would be put in prison for what we're doing today. And so the contemporary times is federal law was the freedom religion, which was in 74 or 78, right in that area, where we as Native people were allowed to do our ceremonies. So a lot of our ceremonies that we do today were hidden back in the day because it was illegal. It was illegal to do that. So you think about, 78. That's not very long. That's not very long ago that we were even allowed to do this. So anything that I talk about is usually a documented source. I can show you the Indian Court of Offenses. You can look that up. If a group of 5 of us was standing together, and it's funny because, and not to get off track of the subject, is that because of these pipelines and pipeline protests, they're actually going back and using those laws in Minnesota, and they're trying to do those laws again here in South Dakota with this Keystone XL pipeline coming through, and saying that a group of us can't gather together. How insane is that?
Well, we always hear it's your lifestyle. You'll be back. She ran away. You guys drink. But so does the rest of the world. And to me, I still feel like they think that people aren't human beings. That we're less. And the only way we ever really see anything is through this, and that's Facebook. We see who's missing, and we always share because those are our relatives. Whether it's Washington State, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Canada, South Dakota, Nebraska, that is our Amber Alert because they're not doing it.
Again, a greater awareness of those issues that seem to always get pushed under the carpet or pushed out of the way. That's something that we as Native people have been dealing with from day one, and I always go back to federal law or case law. One of the things that came along with in a reservation era when we were placed on reservations is they call it the bad man clause. So a non-native person that came onto the reservation and he did something through that bad man clause, you're supposed to be held accountable. But to date, because of jurisdiction, state, federal, they don't follow that bad man clause, but it's in place. So for all of these years, I can't remember the percentage of what the number is on Indigenous women, but it's something like 10 times the national average of missing women. And so in an awareness level, it's good that they're bringing an awareness to it, but they're placing us again in a category of Indigenous when it should just be missing and murdered women. But if that's what it takes, if it takes a horse ride or it takes a walk or a run or a protest to bring that awareness, I'm 57 years old and it's going to be 2020, and this stuff just blows my mind that we're finally getting to this point, and it's going to be 2020. What does that say about the federal process? What does that say about a state process where you can worry about this group of people But over here, secondary, and it shouldn't be that way. So for me, it's just a greater awareness of those issues. If there could be and it's not just South Dakota, this is across the board, all native lands all across North America. There's unsolved murders, and there's still missing women, and so I can only be thankful that, again, there's an awareness that's rising, so the greater community becomes involved. The more people that you have to help is always a plus, no matter whatever law enforcement agency, whatever federal agency, just community awareness, has just been pushed under the table too long.
I remember me and my ate talking about how they brought him up this river here behind you, and there was nowhere to dock here, I guess, back then. Otherwise, they probably would have dropped him off here, But anyway, they went on up the river to Fort Thompson, old fort, and we have a lot of relatives there that are from here. The Yanktonais, when they built the dam, I think about them when I'm up there, because as a THPO director back then, there was remains found. They were not the Hunkpate, they were the Yanktonais band, which is from here, one of our bands that were up north, and we have them in Canada. But the women, yeah, they endured. Some they say carried their babies in their arms, for 3 days, and the babies were dead. So put yourself in that position, and the feeling, and yeah, it gets really emotional when we talk about these things, and it's again it goes back to the historic piece of the trauma that was put on us by the leaders back then of the United States. We lived up to our obligation, I believe. We're here on this, I call it a prison camp. They call them reservations, but things are different for us nowadays. Back then we were the caretakers of the land. Now I guess we're stuck in a little place, and it gets different once you go outside the boundaries. And then when we leave from here, we get into areas where the racism is terrible. We see people that just hate us for not even knowing what we're doing, But still, it just goes back to the way they were brought up, I guess, Their grandparents taught them that, we're savage, bad people, I guess, and when you see them, that's all they are, But if you get to know any native, we have stereotypes out there on us. To this day, we still are looked down on. But I'm very proud of being who I am.
The meaning of this ride is that to remember that there were over 1,500 that were imprisoned in Fort Snelling, and out of those 1,500, it was over at least 11 or 1,200 were women and children. So the ones that were taken on steamboat, those were women and children. So along the way, starting in Minneapolis down to St. Louis and then coming up to Missouri, whenever somebody would die because there was a lot of sickness and the boats were overpopulated, and when somebody died, they didn't have a proper burial. They just basically threw them in the water, and that was the end of it, whether it was a woman or children. So the ride is to remember those women and children that came up and then were dropped off in Crow Creek or Fort Thompson. So that's kind of the meaning of this, is to remember the women and the children.
the staff here on this ride, the women and children's ride, the staff has a pipestone carved Wea head on it, and it has 300 plumes, and there's some feathers honored that belong to some people, and there are tobacco ties on it, and those are all individual. The 300 plumes represent the 300 children that died the first year. The exiled prisoners were brought out here that first year. And they lost 300 plus children. Those plumes represent them.
Why I started to ride is when Jim and Perry came and asked us. I was still using pretty heavily or pretty regularly at that time, and I wanted different. And I had started trying to straighten out my path a few years before then, but with change, that's how it is. And so when he asked me, I was pretty unsure of it, and wanted to represent that, but didn't really feel I deserved to do that. So I was my dad. I always ask him things, and he's like, "Pray on it." I'm like, "Oh man, come on, just give me an answer." And I'm beginning to understand what that means. And I just asked, like, show me that I'm good enough to represent this. And I don't feel like I'm good enough. For me, it brought awareness to why them old ones struggled, and like how much they went through, and for us just to be here, for us to be walking, breathing, talking, and wow, the things you read about and the stories you hear, it's just unreal, and made me understand, like, wow, the love they had, and it's pretty powerful to experience that and get that understanding that there's countless people struggled for you to be here. So at least honor that and do something with it.
It's harder for us to come together in a good way, but we always come together in depth. I think these rides symbolize what Oyate is as a whole, because more than coming together in death, we should always be together in life. So I think these rides are significant in our culture, because at the end of time story, it's a coming to circle. That means all nationalities, white, red, black, yellow, the colors of the circle. So, and I do believe that 7th generation is who we need to do this for and save. And that's why there's 7 powers. That's why we have the 7 sacred rites. That's why we honor the 4 directions, Unchimaka, Tukashida, and the 7th being ourselves. I believe that if we can get past what's been taught us, and we go back to feeling the way we feel on a day-to-day basis, I think we could bring circles together.
There's a lot of trauma within families that deal with that, and when I think about that kind of stuff too, it's kind of like a double whammy to a people that already has like pre-existing conditions of PTSD, things like that, where they're being triggered, and a lot of young people back home, or just all on any res, they talk about the suicide rates being really high, and I believe it's because of that PTSD. Go anywhere else in America, suicide rates aren't that high, but if you go to a reservation, it's really high. Even myself, I when I was younger, I made an attempt, to take my life, and you know, that just, you know, I was going through a lot at that time. You know, it made me think about a lot of things, and you know, when that happened, you know, it kind of scared me. But you know, I thought about like, why did I want to do that? And you know, I was depressed. I went into a depression and started having anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and I thought I was going crazy, you know. So I didn't know how to treat it, I guess. So I drank a lot, and eventually that led to me getting in trouble and took me down a dark path. But you know, because of these ways, it kind of brought me back. So I'm grateful for the horse and, you know, all the leaders, the headsmen of these rides that lead these rides. Gives us a purpose, another purpose, repurposing a time where I wasn't really doing anything, you know, and it made me find out more about myself and why I was dealing with things, and you know, gave me that support, you know, that support system that I didn't really have there. You know, people gathering around people that talk about PTSD and, you know, trauma and things like that. You know, I never grew up hearing any of that until I started coming on these rides, and then I started to realize, hey, you know, some of the people that come on the ride, some of the other riders and leaders, they talked about it, and I recognized those same traits that they were talking about within myself, you know. So finding that support and finding, you know, that, I don't know what you would call it, more of a mentorship, guidance, you know, helping me process things, you know. I find that here, you know, on these rides.
As the years go on, there was younger people. I seen young ladies and my nephew grow up on this ride, and I was talking the other day about what I feel that means, and it's cool to see that they're riding for the children that suffered and their families. And the way we believe is you have 7 generations in you, and the traumas, the struggles, but also the strengths. And when you start realizing that, or when I started realizing that, my focus went away from the negative things around me. My environment never changed. I still live in Fort Thompson, still work there, and it's just what I see, how I see things, and recognizing that. And maybe if I was exposed to that at a younger age, I would have followed maybe a less difficult path. And I think that's what we're supposed to do, is make the next generation's life better than what we had. And if that's exposing them to this, or maybe being a part of it, then that's a good thing.
I would say the past maybe 3 years now, it kind of came down to that, where it was majority young youth, you know, younger kids, you know, our kids, you know, they got older. I've seen a lot of these kids grow up on these rides, you know, so, you know, just to kind of see them when they're kids now, some of them adults, you know, that's a good feeling, because I know that, you know, they're watching and they're learning their way of life, and also finding that identity, you know, and connecting it with the horse, you know. So that's pretty awesome, you know. So.
The horse has energy. Not only the horse, I mean, we say the horse has energy, but creation has energy. Every animal, every blade of grass, it all has their own form of energy. The horse became a family member when the native first came in contact with him. They brought him in, they treat him as family like that and stuff. So this energy, this healing energy that he has, he share it with the people like that. So grandmas and grandpas, they knew these things back there. Today it's a little different because we're not in that environment anymore, so it's a little harder to understand, to realize, to make these connections. Simple explanation of that is like you can take a horse into anywhere there's a public gathering. You lead a horse into that gathering or by that gathering, and what you're going to get is you're going to get all these little ones, and they're going to all come running and look at them, and you can see the smiles, and it lights them up, and they come running, and they're like this, and they want to touch that horse. They want to make contact with it. That's the energy that we're talking about. That's this healing power that we're talking about. It does that to them. It has that effect.
You get a lot of time to be with yourself. And I don't know if a lot of people can really understand that, you know, because a lot of people, they like to relate this. You know, people driving on the road, they relate it to trail riding, you know, but they don't really understand the significance. They don't understand the movement, and, you know, it's all about energy, you know, what we create here. When we have all these horses together, it creates energy, you know. Like, if we had a horse, for instance, if we had a horse that hadn't been ridden in a long time, wouldn't go by itself. You get all these horses together, they start moving, you know. So the horse and you and, you know, the company, you're all creating a greater energy that helps with that processing, you know. I don't think you can get that at a clinic or in a therapist session, you know, counseling. You can't get that there. We get it in the ditches with our horses. You know, horses are the therapist. So it's awesome. We found a way to tap in, you know, stuff that we already knew, but, you know, kind of just put it to the side. A lot of people, you know, really talk about that stuff. So. But we are now. So.
The horses, I believe the main thing about these rides is the medicine that these Shukowakas give us. I said earlier how I got a horse. That is the biggest honor to me. I'm gonna get choked up. It's unexplainable, the medicine that they carry. Not just to sit on their back, but to hold them and feel them, and just to be around them. It's healing for not only our people, every nationality. There isn't a nationality in the world that doesn't feel the medicine of a horse. Or a culture, or a region. The horse is Wakan, Shukum Wakan, Lila Wakan. And the fact that they, through all our turmoils and abuse and our mistreatment to them and not knowing, they still have unconditional love. They still are always there, like the Creator is for us.
The relationship with me and the horse, you know, means a lot, because it reminds me of our ancestors, and that's why I do ride. Because sometimes I just get just a little taste of what the ancestors had, if not even that. And riding, you know, it's beautiful. You connect with the horses and build a bond and like a relationship. You know, it's like kind of like a man's best friend.
So I'm a firm believer that these rides not only have to continue, but that it's a healing for all people. The world is round. medicine wheel is round. Joining circle, coming full circle is round.
So we honor our grandmothers who were taken down river, put on boats, and they came up the Missouri River here to Fort Thompson on June 1st, 1863. It really makes my heart happy to see the young ones, more and more young ones that are taking our place, so to speak. So, and I've seen a lot of healing come from this ride and the 38 ride for our people, and it's a good thing.
My sister was 15 years old and was murdered out in the field, and so the whole community came together and locked hands and looked for her. And it wasn't until 3 days later we found her in the same spot we had all walked through. So not only did they do this harm to her, they kept her in the trunk of a vehicle before they put her back after the people were done looking for her. I was in boarding school and I was raised by white people because of the trauma situations and the bad happenings that go on to children in the home. Me being firsthand, knowing my daughter, my sister, I keep calling her my daughter, because I stood in as a mom a lot of times in my family when my mom was in treatment. And they were so young, there's 12 of us, they didn't know any better, they called me mom. So I apologize for calling my sister but I feel in a way all women are mothers to all children. All women are mothers to men. And it's, in the end of times, it takes a good woman to make a man be a man.
Well, this is a really special event for the state of South Dakota because we're drawing attention to the fact that we have a lot of folks and Indigenous women that have been missing. Human trafficking impacts all of our communities, cities, counties, our reservations, and the more that we can draw attention and awareness to that, the more we can all work together to make sure that we are protecting our women and that we're taking care of those who are most in danger.
I think that a lot of our women and children are more than just missing, as far as even the sex trafficking too, because I, at one point in my life, was for sale as well, and so I'm a survivor of that, to break free from that terrible life, and so that's how I know I'm relatable to it, because I once, at one point, I guess, could have been considered a missing person that was definitely for sale.
You know, so many times we just need people to watch out for each other. So individuals that may see some signs of individuals who've been trafficked or others who may be in danger of that, don't have supervision at home, are loners, we see someone paying attention to them that we know has a bad reputation or a stranger. Talking about this and raising awareness so we watch out for each other is incredibly important.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that I can have my son be involved with too, and then the other kids my other two kids that I have at home, then we just bring that back and share it with them, and then we are becoming reconnected with our culture and the ways of our ancestors, which is really adding to our connectedness at home too.
Well, it's a really sad part because most Native people do know somebody who's murdered or missing. I don't know if it's our small communities, our small circle, but it shouldn't be like that. You know, you can go out in the rest of the world, and I asked you yourself, do you know anybody? And you said no. You know, and I personally I knew 5, that are gone today, and that's hard because I have grandchildren here. I have 5 granddaughters with me, and my daughter, she's riding. My granddaughters are, and is it going to be like that for them? Are they going to know 5, or are they going to be part of that number? That's the scary part, to see, things like that. A lot of people want to pray about something, but then walk away and let something else take care of it, And to me, I think we need to walk our prayer, and while we're doing that, asking for that help to make it happen. And no matter what it is, if you want to succeed in something, They're going to give you everything you need to succeed, but it's up to you how far you want to go with it. And to me, those words right there say it all. Walk your prayer. Live your prayer. And you can make it happen, but it's up to you how far you want to go.
Yare-ah-ho, 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 Tonkashila, Heyoshimalayo, Heyoshimalayo, Heywani wachi Eloi, Heywani wachi Eloi, Hey, Yay-ah-ho, yay-ah-ho, yay.